Less than 2 hours ago, my off-leash dog Jasper encountered a black bear on the trail. We're both fine, but it's a reminder that hiking with dogs can be a little rough. Woo! Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Scott Montague from Coquitlam Search and Rescue, and I'm going to be trying to make sure that this guy doesn't disrupt our webinar tonight. Your cameras and mics are off for this session, but we still want to hear your comments and questions. If you have a question, throw it in our Q&A box so we can keep track of them, and we'll either answer live or online. If you don't want the audience to see your name, just make sure you mark the question as anonymous. I'll also be keeping an eye on the chat box and posting links in there as we go. I'd like to encourage you to use the reactions button during the webinar. In fact, let's try that right now. Using the reactions button, give a thumbs up if, like me, you yourself have encountered wildlife while hiking with your dog. There's a fair number of thumbs ups. Wow. Interesting. For those of you who stick around to the end, by the way, you're going to have a chance to win a giveaway from our sponsor, BrightSource, as well as possibly getting, am I reading this right? A $250 dog first aid kit from our guest? Whoa! No matter what, everyone will be going home with a freebie from our sponsor, FatMap, as well. That's just amazing. Anyway, to get us started, I'd like you to welcome our Executive Director of AdventureSmart in BC, the pack leader of what goes in your backpack, Sandra Rytz.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here. And Scott, thank you for the introduction. And it's going to be a great evening. I'm pretty excited to get going and share with you what we've got. And really, the show tonight isn't about me. I think some of you have seen and heard me before. Tonight is all about our guest. But before we get to that and the topic, which is an exciting one, there's been lots of engagement online and chats about tonight's session, which is one of our summer series sessions. And I know some of you are here with us this evening have also joined us for a few of the first ones and other seasonal ones. And there's more to come. We're going to take these right to the beginning of August, which is really fun for us. We really quite enjoy them. You know, I'm really here to say thank you right out of the gate on behalf of the 3,400 search and rescue volunteers in the province of British Columbia who respond to 1,500 search and rescue calls annually right now. There's 78 search and rescue groups in the province of British Columbia. And all of those volunteers, I know I just used that word, are volunteers. They're unpaid professionals. Scott is one of the 3,400. And they're dedicated, skilled, highly trained, unpaid professionals. So we really can't say enough about them. And everything that we do with BC AdventureSmart and the work I do with the team we do here at the BC Search and Rescue Association is to help Scott and all the others have reduced number of search and rescue calls and the severity. That's the whole goal. And that's up to you and me. I spend a lot of time outside too. I have a mountain bike that I spend a lot of time with and some friends out there doing all sorts of fun things. So without further ado, thanks for joining us this evening. Let's just go over a few basics before we pass it over to our guest tonight. If you're familiar with us, you've probably heard about the 3 T's before, but this will be a reminder for you, or an introduction to what we call the trifecta of outdoor safety here at BC AdventureSmart. These are key things. These are 3 simple things that can be actioned by you and those of us who recreate outdoors to make a safer adventure so that you can reach your destination, which is always home the summit, the peak, that's only halfway. You get to turn around and make your way to your destination, which is home. So the first one is trip planning in detail. Take your time to really structure that, plan it based on your group dynamics, where you're going, the weather. We're delivering our Survive Outside program throughout the summer series, and we jump into these 3 in detail, major detail. Or DM us any time to ask further questions about these, or check out the websites as well. So trip planning is key. Planning that all and letting someone know where you're going, leaving this information with a trusted emergency contact in case something goes wrong. Training is also a major part of this recipe, if you will, and making sure that you have some certifications depending on the activities that you choose to do, but mentorship counts. Continuous training will always be of benefit. It can be physical, mentorship, you can join a club, spend some time with someone who's better at the activity than you are. Season and sport-specific training is key. So there's some great components to that piece, but it is an important one as well. And then taking those essentials with you. There's a foundational group of essentials that should go with you all the time, but there's also seasonal and sport-specific and personal essentials that are essential to take with you. And so trip planning, training, taking the essentials, and don't forget to add that season and sport-specific gear. These can really set you up for success. A great way to help plan, if you're not too sure what goes into a trip plan, is our AdventureSmart Trip Plan app. It's free of charge to anyone in Canada, and it's available to you to help you check off the boxes, literally, where you're going, who you're going with, the route you're taking, the gear you have with you, where you're leaving your vehicle if you're using that, or did you take transit where you dropped off, any medical conditions that emergency personnel might need to know if they're looking for you. This trip plan that you file will go to your emergency contact. And if anything happens, you're not back on time and they can't reach you, there's somewhere to start. And this information can be shared with police, RCMP, who are the tasking agency on all search and rescue calls, and they task out the local search and rescue group. So this information that you share here or on any form of your trip plan makes their way to search and rescue group, then they can start looking for you, and they have a big piece to the puzzle. They know where you are. So it's a great tool. Feel free to use it anytime. And if you have any questions, please reach out. We also talked earlier, as I started the session tonight, how many search and rescue calls we do have in the province of BC. Once again, it's 1,500 currently right now. In case of an emergency, and 1,500 times a year it happens, this is a key component to your success as well, to be found and to reduce the severity of your incident. Stopping is critical. We also deliver a children's program. It's for kindergarten to grade 6ers, and it's called Hug a Tree and Survive. This STOP analogy, acronym, is the adult version of Hug a Tree. So stopping allows you to base yourself in a safe area, and you're not wandering anywhere. You're not going down creeks, ravines, and gullies. Stopping is a key component to this in any emergency. You're going to think about what you've got, where you are, how am I communicating with search and rescue? Well, you've already filed a trip plan, so that's key. You have a communications device that is not your phone. That is your secondary means. Primary or other means like Zoleo, InReach, Spot. Observations are critical. You're in a safe area. You're not exposed to danger. And then you get to plan and use the essentials you brought with you, create a shelter, have food and water, take care of the emergency at hand if it's first aid, could be doggy, first aid. And this stop analogy really can bode well for success and help search and rescue volunteers find you faster. So it's critical to not move. And one piece I'd like to include here, it's really important to go with others. It's really important to go with others and not to go solo, ideally, so that you have someone else. I always use 3 is really helpful. 3 people. Someone can be communication, someone can be helping me if I'm injured, and we have a system on the go. As we move into our crutch of the evening, I'd like to introduce you to Celine Rytz. Celine Rytz is a veterinarian professional, a certified pet first aid instructor, and owner of Backcountry Aid and Rescue Kit, which stands for B.A.R.K. And she provides pet first aid training and pet first aid kits designed to withstand the rigors of a season in the bush. Celine has worked as a tree planter for over a decade, and has fulfilled roles as foreman, quality checker, and occupational health and safety advisor. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Pre-Veterinary Animal Sciences from the University of Vermont, where she competed on the NCAA Division I Alpine ski team. Since completing her degree, she has worked in several veterinarian clinics practicing and in large urban emergency care centers and rural practices as a vet assistant. Celine lives in beautiful Revelstoke, BC, with her dog Fella and her cat Skiptooth. And she's also a dog sled musher and a volunteer ski patroller at RMR, which is also known as Revelstoke Mountain Resort. Without further ado, we'd like to welcome Celine to our stage, and I can't wait to sit back and learn about everything you've got to share with us tonight. So thanks for your time and for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Scott, as well. So I guess it is my turn now to share my screen. All right, here we go. Can everyone give me a thumbs up if they can see my screen? Yes. Okay. Oh, I got a lot of those. Great. Okay. So yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really excited to be on here tonight. I think this is something I can imagine all the participants here are probably tuning in with their dog by their side. So I think this is definitely broadcasted to the right audience here. So a bit about myself, as Sandra mentioned, I am a tree planter. I was actually tree planting today. I am in a bush camp in Fernie for the season. In my experience, both in backcountry wilderness as a forestry professional, but also as a wilderness lover, I've really come to see that there are a lot of accidents that happen and mishaps with dogs in the backcountry. And for the most part, people are pretty ill prepared and pretty ill equipped for dealing with situations like that. So bridging the knowledge I have from working in vet clinics, I realized that there is a real need for more outreach, for more education, and more discussions like this to talk about our pet safety, because they accompany us everywhere we go. So they are very deserving of proper first aid care and emergency response when something happens. So a bit about B.A.R.K. I started B.A.R.K, I guess now 2 years ago. So I specialize in the care and management of dogs in outdoor environments, as well as working dogs. So search and rescue dogs, like avalanche rescue dogs. If you've ever been to Revelstoke, we have a pretty big team there, as well as sled dogs, hunting dogs, and really by extension, any dog or cat, perhaps, adventure cat, that accompanies their owners in the wilderness, perhaps living remotely or even in small communities throughout BC that don't have immediate access to vet care. And just really any owner that wants to take kind of control of their understanding and their ability to look after their animals. So this is really coming from a desire to provide better care for these dogs in outdoor environments. So first slide, ooh, that's a tough one to look at. But unfortunately, these things happen. So just a quick breeze through of the things that we may encounter when we're out in the wilderness with our pets. I hope none of you guys have ever had to experience something quite like this, but maybe if you have, maybe give me a little thumbs up so I can see that I'm not the only one. So a couple photos here, some stinging reactions from pesky biting insects, stick impalements and lacerations from sharp sticks or rocks, porcupines for those dogs that have super high prey drive. Even something like a quick dog fight or a little scuff can result in a pretty significant injury. And the risk here, really putting this conversation on our own safety, the risk that we face when we are dealing or handling injured animals or during a really stressful situation with very stressed out animals. So that photo there is actually my own hand. I sustained a bite from handling an injured animal. So we'll talk about our own safety when dealing with these types of situations. So before we even head out on the trails, we need to know before we go. So if we are taking our dogs out on adventures, we really need to be cognizant of the environment and the inherent risks and hazards. Much like Sandra was saying, seasonal or activity specific, it's the same with our dogs. The more remote the activity, the more prepared we should be for extreme conditions. So this is really something to consider if we are going really deep into the wilderness, or perhaps we live a really far ways away from veterinary care. The scope of even minor illnesses or injuries can become very serious when they happen under challenging conditions. If you've ever experienced an animal emergency, you probably can attest that animals can act very in a lot of fear and maybe perhaps aggressively. And that can really complicate things when you're already quite stressed out and far from your truck. So one thing that I really try to stress in all my conversations about animal safety, we need to include our pets in the emergency response planning. Once we have a plan, we need to practice it with our animal in the environment that we'll be recreating in. You'll never really know if your plan works until you practice it. So that's kind of going back to those 3 T's. Plan your trip, train for it, and bring the essentials that you need. So what sort of checklist would we be looking at then? So the responsible dog ownership really falls on us, and that starts with safety, effective mitigation strategies, and preparedness. So a couple tips here before we hit the trails. At home, when our dogs are really comfortable and at ease, practicing safe handling within their comfort threshold. This is really key when we're in a situation where our dog perhaps has sustained an injury to their paw, or they're quite painful somewhere, and we need to assess what is happening. And if they're already kind of sensitive, touch sensitive with their ears or their tail or their paw, that can be really difficult to wrangle them. So really practicing that ahead of time so that they are desensitized to us handling them. Including obedience training in your daily routine. Much like Scott had just mentioned, run-ins with wildlife happen all the time, and we need to know that we can communicate with our dogs, especially when we need them to come back, when that's non-negotiable. Have your dog examined by a veterinarian regularly to ensure that they are fit and healthy enough to be accompanying you on these adventures, but also that they're up to date on their vaccines and their parasite treatment, which is something that they're at a heightened risk of exposure in the wilderness. Building fitness gradually, much like us, conditioning takes a bit of time. What we often see in the springtime, dogs in kind of through the winter are couch potatoes. They don't get out too much, perhaps just a couple leash walks through the day. And then in the springtime, when the owners are really excited to get out on the trails, they bring their dogs. And what we see is a lot of overexertion and pretty extreme fatigue with dogs. So we want to make sure that we're building that fitness gradually so that they are fit to accompany us on the trails. Feeding quality nutrition and maintaining a healthy weight. So a dog can eat up to about 50% more of its daily caloric intake when exerting themselves really physically. So picture how hungry you get on a camping trip. It's the same for your dog. So consider that quality nutrition really helps with their health. Providing a safe and quiet space for our dogs to rest and decompress after extraneous exercise outdoors. So that's also just so that they can decompress after the excitement, because that can really be perceived in the body as stress. Including our dogs in the planning for an emergency, perhaps a natural disaster or an evacuation. Cleaning food and water bowls regularly to prevent foodborne pathogens from accumulating in the bowls, such as E. coli, Listeria, and Salmonella. Grooming coats regularly and trimming nails, that's just good basic hygiene, but that also really helps prevent things like foxtail grasses or ripped nails from going unnoticed. The more we can groom and assess the nails, the less likely they're going to have little cuts and scrapes that we won't notice. Properly identifying our dogs to ensure if they do go astray and someone finds them, that they're able to bring them back to us quickly, and carry digital copies of veterinary records just on the off chance that you need to access them. So before we head out on our trip, just kind of off the cuff, a couple really helpful things, especially if your dog is a little more worried. Desensitizing is so important to do before we head out. So desensitizing our dogs to perhaps sleeping in tents by just setting one up in your backyard and having a sleepover in the backyard. Considering the age, health status, and medical conditions of our dogs. So People love bringing their puppies out with them. It's so exciting when you get a new pup and you just want to take them everywhere. However, we do really need to be mindful of the effect that it has on their joints. Over-exercising young puppies can actually result in a lifetime of compromised joint health just because their joints and their bones aren't fully developed. So that can actually be quite harmful for them. So considering kind of tailoring their exercise to the appropriate level that they can keep up with. Vaccine status. So dogs are at a very high risk of exposure to wildlife in the outdoors, and by extension, the diseases that wildlife carries. So being sure that we're really keeping up to date with those vaccines and parasite treatment. So when we head outdoors, first and foremost, we want to be sure that our dogs are actually welcome in the location that we want to head out. Some national, provincial, and even regional parks don't allow dogs. Or if they do, it might just be on leash. So we need to be respectful of the etiquette of the trails and the parks that we're visiting. Monitor water uptake and eating habits. So to ensure that our dogs are getting the nutrition and the hydration that they need. Dehydration can result in muscle fatigue, soreness. It's very similar to us. So if our dogs are, the type that get a bit too excited and forget to drink water and forget to eat, that can really affect their stamina. So really considering just how much they need while they're out on adventures. So like in this photo, refraining from letting our dogs swim in or drink from water that is noticeably discolored, has surface scum, or appears greasy. If you've heard of cyanobacteria or blue-green algae, that's what we're looking at here. That can be toxic and even lethal to dogs if they come into contact. And consider the B.A.R.K system for dogs' safety in parks. So bagging the waste, pack it out, always leash your pet, respect wildlife, and know where you can go. So we're not all K-9 anatomy experts, but one thing that we can work into our daily routine, especially if we are going out with our pets, is what's called a head to tail assessment. And this should be done under 2 minutes, especially if you do it fairly regularly, you'll have a pretty good system. But these daily checks really help us get a good idea of how well our dogs are, in the environments that we're bringing them into. If they are sustaining injuries, we really need to be mindful of it. I know, for example, my dog Fella, pictured here, is a really tough guy, and he would never complain if he got a cut or a scrape, or any of those types of things. So by actually looking over, it does tell me a lot about the things that he's dealing with. So looking for ticks and other parasites, cuts and scrapes, impaled objects like these foxtail grasses, even like in the early spring, all the really sappy pine needles can kind of work their way up into the really delicate bits. Torn nails and paw pad injuries, which are very common on the trails, especially in early spring. Feeling for any heat, redness, or swelling from joints, especially just in case there is any sort of musculoskeletal pain or injury that they've sustained. And just checking to see if there's any sort of pain response as you kind of run your hands through your dog, seeing if there are any spots that are quite sensitive or delicate that they're kind of reacting to. So today, when I was tree planting, I just did one of these head to tail assessments on my dog like I do every day. And sure enough, this is actually what I found. And I took this photo about an hour ago. So not one, but 2 lacerations on his paws, probably from chasing a squirrel. But that looks pretty painful, and that does require some bandaging from me. So if I did not check, I would have never noticed. So again, it's really important to do these things because our dogs can't really communicate that to us, like, hey, I cut my paw, or hey, my paw is kind of sore. So really taking a look at all the really delicate bits, the nooks and crannies in the paws, between the toes. You'll be surprised all the things that you'll find. The more you look, the more you see. Okay, so going into emergency response planning, something that is hardwired into our brains as outdoor enthusiasts. And as Sandra mentioned, we have to stop. Stop, think, observe, plan, then act. And this goes for our dogs as well. We need to assess every situation carefully before taking action. People respond with a real heightened sense of panic and worry when their dogs are injured. Most of it really has to do with the fact that they don't know what to do. They've never once considered, for example, in this photo, hey, we're at the top of a mountain. My dog has fallen and she is in a lot of pain and needs to be carried out. How are we going to do this? Because we haven't considered what our response plan would be, we tend to react in a state of stress, which can actually stress our dogs out quite a bit. Our dogs are really just an extension of us. So when they feel that we're stressed, they're going to feel stressed too. So planning ahead for the risks and hazards that you may encounter, and not to sound like an alarmist, but you kind of want to plan for the worst case scenario, because then at least you'll have a plan in place if something does happen. You want to adapt that plan. And so kind of envision those what if scenarios, like what if this doesn't work out, or what if we get lost on the way out? All these things that not only make your trip safer, but also for your dog. And finally, consider your own safety before responding to an injured dog. If you are at risk of sustaining an injury, you should not respond until it is safe to do so, or until you have someone else who can assist you. One thing that we commonly see on the receiving end in a veterinary clinical setting, when an animal has been injured far ways away from the clinic, people rush to the dog's aid, and the dog, out of that kind of state of that fight or flight, will bite. And the owner or the person handling the dog becomes the patient, which really does affect your ability to respond to situations like this. Couple of really key things to really help build your knowledge and your safety with your dog in the backcountry. Familiarize yourself with how to assess your dog's condition and their vitals, much like us, like the temperature, pulse, respiration. That really gives you kind of an idea of what sort of state that your dog may be in after an injury. This is really best done by taking a pet first aid course and getting the appropriate training before heading out. Knowing where the nearest 24-hour animal hospital is in your area. For example, I'm in Fernie right now, and we do have a local clinic open Monday to Friday. However, in the evenings or overnight or on the weekends, if there is any sort of emergency, our next nearest clinic is in Cranbrook. So that's another hour and a half away. So something to consider, as that does really affect your timeline when dealing with a situation. And knowing how to transport your dog quickly and safely to medical assistance. So here's a big long list of all the things that you would learn in a pet first aid course. I am a certified pet first aid instructor through Walks and Wags Pet First Aid. They are the largest and most recognized company for this in North America. I highly recommend it if you guys, I would imagine if you're tuning in, you probably have a dog by your side or another adventure animal. This is so essential. We really rely on each other in the backcountry to have the training to know what to do in emergency situations. And that's the same for our animals. They rely on us. So really knowing these types of things, it's very similar to like a human level 1 first aid course, where you cover all the basics of bandaging, life-saving interventions like CPR and artificial respiration. So these courses are offered all over Canada. I do have some throughout BC in the summer and fall. But again, this is definitely worth its weight in gold when you're dealing with something in the backcountry, because you are really the first responder when something like this happens to your own pet and you're a long ways away from home. So a couple essential items that we really want to pack with us when we're going out, or have our dog pack in their own little doggy backpack. Just going through here, a couple things, pet first aid kit, high visibility identification. So like a reflective vest, a GPS collar. Those are great for dogs, such as most of the Huskies that I've ever met that love to just roam and do their own thing. Booties for not just for the snow, but for really rough terrain or really hot terrain. Let's say even just walking on hot asphalts in the summertime, that can be too hot for their paws. So having booties that they're comfortable with so that you can throw them on if you need. A rain jacket, or what I actually bring, is a brightly colored garbage bag, a bright orange garbage bag. You can just rip 4 holes in the bag for some leg holes, and you've got yourself a pretty nifty rain jacket that also doubles as a high visibility cloak for the dog. I know my dog really hates it when I put it on, but it's much better than getting soaked when we're high alpine. Paracord, a great thing to have if you're perhaps going to maybe be encountering hunting traps, as that is a really essential item to disarm the spring in certain traps. Needle nose pliers to pull out pesky thorns or porcupine quills, and a pen light just to look in those really dark nooks and crannies in case there is something that might have gotten in there. So safe handling and restraint. When we are dealing with an injured animal, we have to ensure that we are considering our own safety. We need to consider how to safely approach, handle, and transport an injured dog, because that is really key for our own safety. As I mentioned, if you've ever been involved in a pet emergency, you know just how stressful that is. You know that the people around you are also stressed. It is so important to remain calm and neutral when handling and transporting an injured animal, no matter how difficult they may be behaving or how non-compliant they are with handling. It is so important because our energy really affects them. So even if you are feeling that stress and that worry, to really take that minute to stop, catch your breath, and then handle the animal. And watching the dog's body language, they cannot communicate with us. They cannot say, hey, I don't want you to come near me. They don't speak English. So what they do instead is give us these nonverbal body language cues. So like in these pictures here, with increasing physical contact or even just approaching a dog, they may go into a form of active submission or defensive aggression, both of which are very dangerous and potentially could lead to a bite, which would really harm you. If we know our dog has sustained an injury to a certain part of the body, perhaps their paw or maybe even their tail. I've slammed my dog's tail in the door. We were at the trailhead. We didn't even get to go out on the hike, and he wouldn't let me touch his hind end for weeks. So really being sure that we're handling these painful areas gently and avoid, really rough handling of those areas. So any injured dog has a kind of a fight or flight response to the pain. This does not mean that your dog is a bad dog or an aggressive dog. This is simply just an instinct to protect themselves and to protect what is painful and what they don't want you to come near, which is that biting instinct. So our way to protect ourselves or to completely mitigate the risk of being bit is to apply a muzzle. So this is something that I highly recommend that everybody carries in their overnight bag, but even just on a simple, afternoon stroll in the woods, something can go wrong. And it is really important that we are safe no matter where we are. So a couple different types of muzzles here. We have the nylon muzzle on that German Shepherd. That's a great muzzle because it's super compact. You can put it in your back pocket. However, it is quite tight and restrictive, so it does prevent the dog from panting, which is not something that we want if the dog will be wearing it for a long time. The better alternative is the basket muzzle here on that big Doberman. That's great. They can drink water and they can pant, but that does still prevent them from biting. If we don't have either of those, a kind of like a tie or a makeshift muzzle that we can use here in this photo, tying a broad strip of fabric or even a triangular bandage above the muzzle, below the muzzle, and then around behind the ears. Just kind of a note here, dogs, if they are vomiting repeatedly, have difficulty breathing, if they're unconscious, or if they have any injury to their skull or jaw, should not be muzzled. Another thing that I highly recommend that you practice and desensitize your dog to, what we call in vet clinics happy muzzling, because it shouldn't feel like they're being punished when that goes on. It's just simply a thing that has to get put on for their safety and for your safety. It should be a non-issue when that has to come out. Practicing a few different types of restraint techniques is another really good thing that you can do at home with lots of praise, lots of treats. These are 4 common restraint techniques that are used in a veterinary clinic setting, but also what you would be using if, let's say, your dog hurt their paw or there was porcupine quills in their neck that you needed to pull out. So really having them be compliant in these postures is so important during emergency situations. So here you can see the dog that's sitting where the paw is up. That's great for being able to have an assistant or someone with you to hold the dog while you assess things. The laying restraint here, or the lateral restraint, you can see that she's got her, I guess, her right arm on just above kind of the neck and holding the head down and holding on to that forelimb that's on the ground. When dogs go to stand up, the first thing that they do is they lift that bottom leg and they pull their head up. So you actually have quite a lot of force by just holding their head down, obviously being mindful of their airway, but holding them down in that position can actually really give you a lot of leverage to keep them there. If you've ever tried to hold a wiggly dog and you don't quite have the right grip, you know that they get more stressed out and more panicky the more they realize they could maybe slip out of the grip. So really having a good hold to make sure that they can kind of relax into that. Finally, the standing restraint, you can see she's got one arm in front of the chest, again, being mindful of the airway, and one under the abdomen to keep the dog in place. These are 3 different techniques to carrying 3 different sizes of dogs. I know there isn't really one size fits all, but when we are carrying dogs, if we can carry them ourselves, ensuring that we are keeping the head, neck, and spine nice and stable, or nice and flat, and supported. With the small dogs, cradling them under one arm and holding their back paws and kind of grasping onto their front forelimbs. And I know this is a photo of a cat, but I'm sure there's one person on this call or on this workshop that has an adventure cat that comes out with them, but the good old kitty burrito works wonders. Cats they're a whole different beast when it comes to restraint and handling them. I'm actually pretty afraid of cats. They're pretty powerful for how tiny they are and can get pretty violent. So just having one of these, like a towel or a hoodie to use on smaller animals. And this is also something that can be used on small wildlife. If you have ever had a situation where you need to rescue a small wildlife, I'm not too sure what that could be, maybe perhaps a squirrel, but holding it in that secure position really ensures your own safety and make sure that they don't slip out of your grip. So if we've got a big dog, or if we've got a dog that's pretty injured and can't just be carried out with one person, knowing how to build a stretcher or actually even having your own rescue sling is pretty key. So here in there's 9 photos here of that tarp. You can see kind of a step-by-step approach for building a tarp sling or stretcher, sorry. And then the alternative, which you can whip up pretty much with the clothes that you have on you and some hiking poles. You can see my little CPR dog here. It's not a real dog, it's the CPR dog that we use to practice in our pet first aid courses. You can see I've put my hiking poles through both arms of the jackets and then zipped up the jackets, and that's made almost like a little hammock to securely have the dog pretty much in a stretcher as good as the one in this tarp here. Whenever we have a dog on a stretcher, we want to make sure that we are securing them to that stretcher there. So having some sort of broad strip of fabric or a long sleeve t-shirt to kind of tie them down. So this is every dog owner's least favorite topic, ticks. This is especially important for those who live in areas like heavily wooded areas, brushy areas, or like dense grass. Because this is a zoonotic concern for us. Ticks transmit diseases such as Lyme disease and Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which is something I've actually had myself and is not fun at all. But because dogs, not that they can transmit those diseases, but they can carry the ticks and then cuddle up in bed or in the tent with us, and that tick can wander over to us. So that's the zoonotic concern there. Ticks are most active in the spring and summer months, and they love hiding in the little nooks and crannies. So armpits, behind the ear, actually underneath the tail and around the anus. And for dogs that eat grass, you can see in this third photo here, ticks they can inadvertently eat ticks and they can burrow into the gum line there. So a new fear unlocked for those who really, really don't like those ticks. If we do find a tick on our dog, we want to make sure that we're taking it out appropriately and quickly. Just like you would with yourself, being sure that you're grabbing the tick as close to the skin as possible with tweezers or a tick remover, and pulling the tick straight up and away from the body. You don't want to twist. You don't want to drown it out in Vaseline or nail polish or all those things that I've heard on the internet. That's not it. You just want to pull it out and make sure that you've got the head that comes with it. The most effective way to deal with ticks is to keep our dogs up to date on their flea and tick medication, so their external parasite control. Couple other things here. These pictures, oh, I feel so bad for these little guys here. They look kind of cute though. Stings and bites. So these are things much like us, our dogs, if there's something out there that wants to sting or bite us, it will probably want to sting or bite our dog. Many insect stings are harmless, but it is possible for animals to have an allergic reaction to insect venom, especially if there's a lot, let's say a lot of mosquitoes or a whole wasp's nest. The toxins within some venomous spiders, snakes, and toads are really more the concern here, and can be far more dangerous and even lethal. So if we're going to an area where we know that there are, poisonous snakes or spiders, just to exercise more caution and maybe, just keep our dogs leashed and close by. If we do see our dog get stung, remove the stinger with tweezers as quickly as possible. Apply a cold compress to the area, and we want to actually avoid exertion, we want the dog to avoid exertion. When our dog's heart is pumping and they're running around, that venom is going to be coursing through their body very quickly, and so they'll have a more exaggerated response to it. Adult Benadryl is a well-tolerated antihistamine that can be purchased over the counter. I won't give the dosage. It's kind of just above the scope of this conversation here, but consult with your veterinarian for the appropriate dosage. It's a great thing to have in your pet first aid kit, or even just in your backpack on the chance that something like this happens. This is something you would learn in a pet first aid kit, or something you will learn in a pet first aid course, but the bandaging techniques, how we bandage up injuries, is super important. If you really have nothing else, a wool sock and some duct tape might do you really good until you get to back to the trailhead. But knowing how to appropriately bandage eyes, paws, ears, tail, abdomen or chest, as well as any sort of impaled wounds. This is a pretty good thing to practice as well before you need to use it for a real injury. So it's kind of fun dressing your dog up in little bandages like this. They hate it, but it is worth practicing because there is a bit of skill involved here. So pet first aid kits. Your pet first aid kit is a lifeline in a pet emergency. I highly recommend having one on you when you're out in the woods, just a small one to carry with you with the basics. And then also having a larger one either in your truck or in your house or at your campsite that would have all of the things that you would reach for in a pet emergency. So this is that kit that we were talking about earlier. This is called the glove box kit. This is a pet first aid kit that I designed and have worked on for a couple years now, just based on my experience working in a clinical setting, as well as someone who lives remotely for several months of the year, and I live in the bush for several months of the year. And so these are the things that I need, and these are the things that I reach for with most other pet first aid kits, and even human first aid kits. I find that they can be quite lacking. So I was always finding that I was supplementing more and more. So I just said, okay, well, I'll just make my own. So I highly recommend if you have a dog that goes out with you to have something set aside specifically for them, just because, yeah, they're very deserving of proper first aid treatment and those supplies when they are injured. So this is the prize for the end of this conversation here, for one lucky winner. Okay, moving along here. So thermal regulation. So this is a fancy way of saying how well or how a dog maintains their body temperature. And that's getting really hot and also getting really cold. So a dog's primary method to cool down is evaporative cooling of the tongue through panting. Dogs are notoriously bad at cooling down or staying cool in hot weather. They cannot sweat like humans can. We have the ability to sweat, and the evaporative cooling of the sweat all over our body helps cool us down. With dogs, it's only a small amount in their paws and ears, but the primary way they cool themselves down is in their tongue. So you see those massive tongues there. That is expanding to allow for more surface area for that evaporative cooling. So here we've got, this is actually one of Scott's neighbor's dogs. I forget the name of the pup there, but enjoying a bit of some high alpine snow. Dogs can really struggle to regulate their body temperature in extreme heat. This is really, really important to consider with how hot our summers are getting and how long our seasons are staying hot. So we want to minimize our dog's risk of heat stroke by providing adequate shade and protection from direct sunlight. We want to make sure that they have adequate ventilation and free access to water. Limiting exercise is imperative during the hottest hours of the day. So what really is quite hard to see in the summertime when folks are out biking in the heat of the sun or the heat of the day with their dogs, and you can really see it that it's quite taxing on their dogs. So really consider, it might be hot for you, but it is way hotter, way hotter for the dogs. The risk with heat stroke, it can have really significant effects on their health. And can be very damaging to a lot of internal organs, including their brain. So please consider coming into the hot months here, really consider that for your pup. Okay, now going into some cold. I'm wearing a down jacket because yesterday it was, I think, almost 30 degrees. And today in Fernie, if you know where Elkford is, which is just north of Fernie, it snowed. It snowed. I can't believe I'm saying this. It snowed. And so this is something that kind of catches us off guard if you've ever gone on a hike in the heat of the summer and a rogue storm blows through and just blasts you with rain and wind and you get really cold. It's the same with our dogs. So frostbite and hypothermia can happen suddenly if our dog has wet fur in cold, windy environments. So preventing hypothermia includes staying warm. That's a bit of a no-brainer. Hydrated, sufficiently fed, and avoiding excessive fatigue. When we're out camping, I very often see dogs out in the pouring rain, or maybe not the pouring rain, but out in the rain all day. And then they come into the tent and they're soaking wet and stinky, but they stay wet and they stay cold. So our dog's body temperature can really drop at night when they've got a wet coat. So something to consider to bring a jacket on these trips in the high alpine. Finally, just a note here on poisoning. Our dogs may encounter many poisons at home, but also in the wilderness through ingestion, inhalation, and physical contact. So if you've ever had your dog go through your lunch, raisins, chocolate, certain nuts, onions, garlic, even marijuana, something that is encountered on trails occasionally, not just discarded roaches, which we can find on trails, hiking trails and even walking paths in like an urban setting, but also human feces. If a human has ingested marijuana and pooped in the woods and maybe didn't discard of it that well, if a dog ingests it, and I'm sure there are people on this call with dogs who are poop eaters, they can actually have a marijuana toxicity from that. So something to consider that, yeah, marijuana can be very toxic, and it's just something that can be very scary to deal with when you're out in the wilderness. So with poisonings, prevention is the very first step in treating them. Most poisonings are caused by human error, carelessness, or ignorance. So staying aware of the toxic items, let's say like grapes. Some people don't know that grapes are toxic to dogs. And keeping them away from them is the first step in treatment of poisoning. One really great resource here is what's called the Pet Poison Helpline. This is a 24-hour phone line where you can immediately get put on the call with a animal like toxicologist, and they will discuss with you based on the amount that your dog has eaten, how big your dog is, and how long ago they consumed that item, what sort of situation you're looking at. There is a fee that is paid up front. However, it is worth its weight in gold when you're, let's say, 2 hours away from a vet clinic and you're really not too sure if it's a true emergency or something that you can just monitor. So these are great phone numbers to have in your phone, but also these websites have a lot of great information about certain toxic items that are found around the house and on the trails so that you know what to avoid. Okay. I wish I had maybe 2 hours more to talk to you guys because I'm just scratching the surface here, quite literally. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, again, like there were so many things I wish I could have gone through, but I highly recommend that pet first aid course. And yeah, happy trails to everyone and your dogs. I wish you guys all the best of times with your four-legged adventure companions.
We have a lot of people who have questions,
Yeah.
and we're going to try and get through as many as we can. And if I don't get through your questions, it's just because we want to also respect everyone's time and make sure that we do what we can. So we were talking about puppies, and I know I have a picture somewhere of me backpacking with or with my dog, this dog Jasper, in my backpack. Because we let him run for a bit, and then he was small, so he went into the backpack, and I continued backpacking with him, and then took him out occasionally to let him run so that he doesn't do too much exercise, right? Is there a general age where their joints are developed enough to be exercised strenuously, or is it like a breed specific thing or a size specific thing?
Yeah, so the long bone physes or the growth plates in dogs aren't fully formed until about 18 months. That's kind of like the conservative number there. So what we often see is people bringing their dogs along that are 5 months, 6 months, because they're so cute and they're so full of energy. Definitely the large breed dogs need a bit more time to grow into their bones. If you have a large breed dog, you notice how gangly and silly they are when they're growing out. So really, taking the time and really maybe waiting that extra season before bringing our dogs out. But definitely a discussion to have with the vet, as it can be not so much breed specific, but more size specific.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
One of the things, by the way, another tip that I did, we do ski joring, which you let your dog pull you while you're going cross country skiing. But one of the things that we did in his first year is I did it the other way around. So I actually brought him in a pulk. So like a little kid, and I actually, because he was small enough, and I put him in the pulk, and we would do our skiing, and then he would sort of get used to being out, and occasionally we would let him out for a little bit of a run, but for the most part he was just hanging back. So there are ways to make sure that you get to have fun with your dog without necessarily over exercising them.
Yeah, because waiting an extra season as a puppy might mean that you get a couple extra years with them on the trails, right? It can be very damaging on their joints to be over exercised as puppies. And I'm sure there's lots of people on this call with older or senior dogs that are starting to slow down. So those are really precious years. So really, milking every hike that we get with them in their golden years.
So another person asked whether or not there's a rescue or evacuation harness for dogs, and like, is there something that you would recommend in that regard?
Yes, for sure. So I think Instagram knows that I love dogs and adventures because all my targeted ads are for that specific rescue harness. I believe it's called Fido. I don't personally have it, so I can't endorse it. But yeah, having something like that is great that you've even just practiced and walked around the house with your dog. But even, like knowing how to build that stretcher is also really valuable. But yeah, I think MEC might have a couple different options, or even online. I think, if you've got a dog that's even over 60 pounds, like I don't think my dog is 90 pounds. So I kind of need somebody to help carry him with me.
Fair enough. Another question came in from Facebook. They were wondering about how to conduct one of that quick assessment on your dog when it's a really long-haired dog. How do you actually manage to figure out whether or not they have ticks or injuries or something like that when it's not a dog like this?
Yeah, and I live in Revelstoke, which is the land of big fluffy dogs that are allergic to leashes. So the way I recommend it is almost go from tail to head, because then you're kind of going against the grain of the fur. For example, ticks are flat. I think my hand is showing up in the thing here. They're flat, so they're really good at hiding with the grain of the fur. So if we're just brushing our dogs or feeling our dogs with the grain of their fur, we're going to miss those ticks, especially if they're not fully engorged yet and really like a big bubble. So when we go against the grain of the fur, we actually flip them up on their head. And so really going like that, or even having like a blow dryer on the cold setting. or the cool setting and just blasting them to see if you can kind of part the hair as much as possible. But yeah, maybe with the large dogs, it's more like a 8-minute head to toe.
Fair enough. Going back quickly to the previous question about the ages, once they get to the point where they're fully exercisable, like 18 months, is that also the time that they can start wearing their own backpacks?
Yes, for sure. And that's not something I said out loud, but it was written on that slide there, that if they are to have a backpack, it's great. So that they can carry their own food and whatnot, but just make sure it's fitted properly, that they're comfortable with it, and that it doesn't exceed 20% of their body weight. We just want to make sure that we're not just throwing on a super heavy pack and they're carting it around and really.
So he can't take all 10 liters of water that I want to bring with me on it?
Well, he just has to pack on a few pounds first, and then we'll balance out.
There's another person asked about recommended or preferred brands of booties for scrambling, mountain pups, and winter. I have a preference. I'm interested in knowing whether or not my preference matches yours.
Yeah, I don't actually have booties of my own. I use what I have in my kit is what's called a pause booty. So it's just kind of like a rubber booty that is mostly just used to go around bandaging.
Right.
Yeah, my dog is one of those dogs that's just like, that's a hard no from me. So I don't really have a good answer for that, but you probably have the answer.
I have a good answer for the winter. So if your issue is that the snow is getting into the winter, there is a brand called Roughwear, and they make something called Polar Treks. And the Roughwear Polar Treks is the only one that, like, almost all of them use a piece of Velcro to go around, but then the dog goes into the snow and the snow gets under the Velcro and it just comes off after enough going through the snow. So they came up with a way of putting a gaiter over it to prevent the snow getting into where the Velcro is. So Roughwear Polar Treks, any of the last 2 or 3 years, because they had an older version which didn't have the gaiter, is definitely my suggestion on that one.
That's great. And actually I did have a thought afterwards to add to that, for those dogs that really don't want booties, but are still out in the cold. Musher's Secret, or even like a Vaseline or paw balm, is amazing to prevent the snowballs from accumulating. And yeah, just all the like really like drying and cracking that comes with walking in the wintertime. Not just the snow, but also the chemicals, like the de-icing chemicals. So one thing that I recommend in the wintertime, for example, if you aren't using booties, with your head to toe assessment, actually really washing off the paws in the wintertime, because that, like the de-icing salt can be very irritating and actually toxic if the dogs are licking their paws afterwards and ingest it.
Couple good questions in a row here. One is, what is the dish soap used in the first aid kit? And then secondly, there's a person who's asking about how to induce vomiting. How do you know what's safe to induce vomiting and what's not safe to induce vomiting? And I think those two might be related. I don't know.
Totally. They kind of. So with the dish soap, I think it's just great to have like just a cleaner to wash your hands, to wash whatever surface that you're using, but it also can be used as an ingredient in a skunk spray bath. So if you get the first aid kit, you'll get the recipe for that. Dish soap, baking soda, and some hydrogen peroxide all mixed together. And I've been told it's the best way. I actually do have a dog grooming friend who says of all the things that she's tried for skunk spray, the best thing is actually Diet Coke. Kind of an interesting one, but the soap is for cleaning, but also as an ingredient for skunk spray. With inducing vomiting, I didn't include that in the slides because, again, it does kind of go above the scope of this conversation. I can go really into detail here, but just kind of on the surface, hydrogen peroxide is something that can be used or given orally to induce vomiting, but that really should only be done at the recommendation of the veterinarian. And it is dose specific. So speaking to your vet ahead of time, based on the weight of your animal, and with hydrogen peroxide, it is really only effective if the dog just consumed something. So it wouldn't work if the dog ate something last night and
Yeah.
then they're starting to show symptoms today. It's only effective if whatever contents, whatever it is still in their stomach. And with hydrogen peroxide, I'll just kind of leave one more kind of note about it. Most people have like a half-used old bottle of hydrogen peroxide in their first aid kit that's been sitting around for a year.
Yeah.
Hydrogen peroxide is like champagne, so the bubbles degrade over time. So if you are using it to induce vomiting, you want to make sure that you get the bang for your buck. So keeping a sealed bottle specifically
Okay.
set aside so that when you need to use it, you're just going to crack the seal and then use it, because otherwise it's just not as effective.
That goes back to a couple other questions. One is about a dog ingesting cannabis. Is that something where you might want to induce vomiting? Is that something where you might not want to? Of course, not everything you want to induce vomiting. And of course, not all of the ways you induce vomiting as a human are necessarily the best way to induce vomiting as a dog either. So
Exactly. Yeah.
like, when do we decide what is the right way to deal with cannabis? Is that one of those things we do? We call the poison hotline and we say, let's deal with this?
Yeah, so a good point about like whether or not we want to induce vomiting. We definitely don't want to be inducing it if it's something like corrosive or like lye or acid or bleach or something even sharp. We don't want to try to induce vomiting multiple times because they can aspirate that and have like aspiration pneumonia. With marijuana, CBD is relatively safe. It's the THC that has the psychotropic effects or like the toxic effects on dogs. So depending on the THC content. And when we have a dog that comes into a vet clinic that's presumed to have a marijuana ingestion or has really like profound ataxia where they're really wobbly and they don't really know what's going on, we do a THC test. So we run a urine test. And usually in Revelstoke, when we have a dog that's wobbly for no reason, that's the THC test is ringing the bells. But yeah, if we know for sure that our dog has recently consumed it, that we have spoken to our veterinarian about the appropriate dosage and how to administer it. We administer it with an oral syringe through the side of the mouth. We don't want to go straight down the hatch because there's always a risk that they can inhale it. Another alternative to that would be activated charcoal, which is something that is also safe to use and can absorb that toxin. In many cases, when dogs have ingested marijuana and they're ataxic, they're wobbly, they're maybe like a bit sensitive to sounds and lights and stimulus, depending on the severity, there are many times where just monitoring the dog and letting it sleep it off, they actually do get the munchies. So to give them like a really easy to digest snack afterwards, and just really keeping them in a place where they're not going to be, running off of a cliff edge or maybe into the water, really keeping them secure, crate resting them if that's something that your dog is comfortable with, and just keeping a close eye on them. And again, going back to that energy that we have when we're dealing with our dogs, we really want to make sure that we're remaining calm, because if our dog is high, if they see that the owner is
they'll
stressed,
match us.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the we have, like, as I said, an infinite number of questions. We don't have an infinite amount of time. So I am going to sort of wrap up pretty quickly. I would encourage everyone to go out and take a pet first aid course, because there's lots of questions. What are the go-to resources? Poisonous mushrooms. How do I get a tick removal thing? What are the commands that are best critical for a dog in the backcountry? There's so many great questions. We could spend all day on it. I'm going to give you one more, which I think is sort of a helpful one that I've seen in the backcountry, which is, how do I encourage my dog to drink when I think the dog needs to, but doesn't want to drink?
Great question, because that is exactly my dog. You know what? My dog is chronically dehydrated and I am always trying to offer him water. And on a hike where I only bring, 4 liters and I'm offering him some, I don't want to dump it back into my water bottle. So I'm always struggling with him. So one thing that I do with my dog is I actually soak his kibble in water to just get a little bit more fluids. I even bring a little can of tuna and drop in a bit of tuna juice. Just to kind of entice him to, oh, that's tasty, even dropping a couple little treats, having, if you're at home, having those like frozen broth popsicles, like you can make little frozen like ice cubes and dump those in the water. Get creative with it. Yeah, like whatever sort of treat or let's think. Yeah, chicken broth, tuna juice, treats in the water, and actually adding water into the kibble. Another really great way to get a bit more hydration is actually serving canned food. And that's kind of a nice thing to have camping because it's, it's sealed, it's airtight. I just open it up and, mix that in with some water and it's almost like a big slurry. But yes, I totally hear you out on that one because my dog will run all day and be like, no, I'm not that thirsty. I'm fine.
Yeah, this dog is getting better.
Yeah.
We managed to convince him to like drink from the water hose that we have and stuff like that, like
Oh,
from our backpack water hose.
Yeah.
But it's taken a long time, and for a long while there, I was doing the treats. So we put a treat in the water, and then he would try and. It's not that he wanted to drink the water; it's that he wanted to get the treat out. So he was trying to get the
Yeah,
treat
so
out.
he's,
But
like,
while he was
biting
doing that, he was consuming the water at the same time in order to get the treat out. So
Yeah, totally. Every little bit helps.
thank you ever so kindly. Did we want to do one more question, or think we're pretty close to the end, aren't we, Sandra?
I think we are, and we always have some fun with our giveaways. And
Yeah.
I could see the questions coming through too. And if anyone wants to get in touch, Celine gave her contact information. I'm sure she would be happy to answer. Send them our way. We can get back in touch with her, or if any of them were for us, you can connect with us through any means on our social medias, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. DM us anytime about tonight on anything else. I think I know on behalf of Celine, Scott, and I, we're happy to help you, and we're here for that. That's what we do. And man, Celine, I know you have way more to share, and I think we can all sit here and listen to the rest. And you're easy to listen to. You're well versed, and really, what a concrete, solid session tonight. Like, I know Scott and I get to do this, and we go back and we have our faves, and I think this one's risen to the surface. It's really awesome to see. So as I conclude, I just want to thank everyone for participating, and don't go away yet, people, because we have a couple things to give away. If you can hang out for a couple more minutes, I'll try to be quick at this. Bright Source is one of our sponsors this evening for all of our summer webinars, actually, and they're offering a great what have we got here? We've got a really cool little twin headlamp, hand lamp light. So they're going to offer that up to the winner who can answer this question. And we're pretty easygoing about this. And it's just get your fingers ready because you get to type in the answers. Scott has to have his eyes on keen because he has to pick the first one. Put it in the
chat section.
Put it in the chat section. Here we go. To win the Bright Source light, which we will get your email from you and then just have it mailed to you straight from Bright Source. List three types of training and or skills that you would benefit from and your dog would benefit from on any of your outdoor adventures. We talked about this at the very beginning. Celine mentioned a few things. So list three types of training and or skills that you and your dog could benefit from in the outdoors. Kind of a combo question. And I sent Scott a few examples of what that might look like, but he's well versed in what those things could be as well. Look at everybody fire answers in. I absolutely love this.
It's amazing. I think the first person who gave me 3 in a row, I'm going to, this is a little difficult. This one's a little difficult. So I am going to do Mary, who said obedience, restraint, and first aid. I think those are all 3 really good options. And thank you very much, Mary, and everyone else who came in. So we'll reach out to you.
I can see these answers and they're awesome. They're just so cool. And, I wanted to do a combination of people and our K-9 so that we can kind of think about it before we go. My goal is that we think about this all beforehand. Same with Celine, same with Scott's. And so this is kind of what we're trying to get you think of. Think of those scenarios, think of those what ifs. And we saw some pictures tonight of a few pups that just needed some extra TLC and help. So thanks for the guidance, Celine. Okay, here we go for this wonderful, beautiful, very generous offer from Celine, this beautiful B.A.R.K first aid kit. My goodness, it's just awesome. I had fun creating the story for it last night and putting it up to share everybody. Okay, fingers ready, here we go. List 2 ways a dog might act out when hurt or in an emergency. I found this really interesting. Celine had brought up a few things. So there's 2 ways a dog might act out in an emergency because they're different. Whoa, look at the answers. Oh my gosh, that just was going like a flutter. I found this interesting because it brought my attention to the surface on it. And they're really good things to look for. Everyone's still firing answers in.
Yeah.
So Scott, I'll leave that up to you.
Alligator
Good luck.
roll. That's a good answer.
What was that one?
The alligator roll.
Oh yeah, there you go. Okay, so I think the first one that I'm going to pick is that had the categories that we talked about earlier is going to be a person named Heisen. And congratulations, Heisen. You chose aggressive and submissive.
Wonderful. Yeah, those were great pieces. Your whole session was great. So what's exciting about this, everyone, is we will upload it tomorrow to YouTube. It will go on the BC Search and Rescue Association's YouTube. That's who affords and financially supports BC AdventureSmart. They actually created it almost 2 decades ago, by the way. And it will also be on the AdventureSmart YouTube as well. So there's fun ways to watch it again. We'll also share it everywhere and anywhere. So if you missed it tonight or want to see it again, it's a great way to go. I'd like to conclude on a really interesting stat that I got from our data administrator, and then we'll let you free for your evening and go from there, and encourage you to join us for the next ones coming up as well. In 2022, there were 49 search and rescues that were specific to dog rescues. 49, Scott's even looking surprised. Yeah, I work with a great team here at the BC Search and Rescue Association, and our data administrator shared that with me this week because I was also on Stoke FM. So was Celine. I was on Monday at 9. She was on at like 9:30. It was awesome. Yeah. And I shared that stat then and here again tonight. I want y'all to think about that because it's really important to think about those what ifs. How do we prevent them from happening? How do we deal with that risk out there that we and the dogs are faced with? And how do we manage those situations when they are emergencies? And 49 calls in 2022 were specifically, uniquely just for dogs. I think that's kind of high. And accidents happen, don't get me wrong, but hopefully you've gained from tonight. I definitely have. Scott, thank you for your help. Thank you, Celine. It was wonderful to have you. You are welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
And everyone who joined us tonight, thank you for taking the time to get informed before you head out there, for you and your pets and your family. And on behalf of the 3,400 search and rescue volunteers in British Columbia, thank you for getting a little bit more in tune with what it takes to be AdventureSmart. And we hope to see you here again next time. Thanks, everyone. Have a great summer.
Take care, folks.